The Elephant Island Chronicles presents The Cipher Chronicles, A Tale of Intrigue by Geo Marin, narration by 11 Labs. The gas station's neon lights pulsed like an electric heartbeat, bathing the fractured asphalt in an unearthly radiance. The air seemed to shimmer with fluorescence, lending the night an ethereal quality. Jonathon Nichols, whose towering frame cut an imposing figure against this backdrop of fuel and convenience, shouldered through the glass door. The quaint jingle of the bell above clashed with the electric hum within, a discordant note in the station's synthetic symphony. Jonathon reached for the trash bags under the counter, their contents a kaleidoscope of human desperation and fleeting joy. Discarded lottery tickets, crumpled cigarette packs, and empty energy drink cans. These were the artifacts of modern-day alchemy, where hope turned to either gold or ash. As he stepped outside, the humid air enveloped him like a sodden blanket. "Another night in paradise," he muttered, his voice sharp with sarcasm. His boots crunched rhythmically on the gravel as he approached the dumpster, echoing the night's hidden pulse. A low growl suddenly pierced the air, halting Jonathon in his tracks. His eyes found a pair of amber orbs gleaming in the darkness, reflecting the neon dance of the station's lights. The source of the growl, a dog, appeared out of nowhere, adding a layer of mystery to the night. "Easy there, Cujo," Jonathon said, his tone a blend of caution and curiosity. "I come bearing gifts of trash and tranquility." The growl softened to a whimper as the Belgian Malinois emerged from the shadows. Their eyes met in a moment of wordless understanding, a connection that was forming between them. "Lost or just freelancing?" Jonathon mused, noting the absence of a collar. He retreated to the store, returning with a makeshift feast of water and day-old hot dogs. "Bon appetit, my enigmatic compatriot," he said, setting the offerings before the dog. The Malinois hesitated, studying Jonathon's intentions before indulging. Little did Jonathon know that this seemingly mundane exchange would soon plunge his life into chaos. Over the next week, Jonathon found himself sharing the late hours with the Belgian Malinois he'd named Cipher, an homage to the dog's enigmatic aura that seemed to grow with each passing day. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in vibrant hues, Jonathon prepared their usual rendezvous with fresh water and leftover chicken strips. "Ah, the nightly special. Fit for a king, or at least a very discerning canine," he quipped. Cipher's tail wagged in sync with the pulsating neon lights as he approached, pausing to look up at Jonathon with a glimmer of shared amusement in his eyes. "You know you've got better taste than half the people who walk through that door," Jonathon said, smiling wryly. As Cipher devoured his meal, Jonathon sat on an old wooden crate, contemplating their unlikely friendship. "You know, they say a dog is man's best friend," he mused, "but they never tell you it's because dogs are the world's best secret keepers. You look like you've got your share of secrets, buddy." Cipher paused momentarily, as if weighing the gravity of Jonathon's words before returning to his meal. Jonathon chuckled softly. "All right, keep your secrets then, but just know that you've got a friend now. Whatever you've been through, it's in the past." For these two unlikely companions, their shared moments of comfort were but the calm before the coming storm. Danger loomed on the horizon, poised to shatter their newfound solace. The atmosphere grew tense as the night deepened. At 11:47 p.m., the silence in the gas station was broken only by the steady tick of the wall clock. Jonathon stood behind the counter, engrossed in a car magazine, when the door burst open with startling violence. A masked man stormed in, brandishing a gun. "Empty the register now!" he snarled, his voice a toxic blend of fear and bravado. Time seemed to slow as Jonathon's eyes met Cipher's. The dog lay near the entrance, every muscle coiled like a spring. A silent understanding passed between man and beast. Cipher lunged at the robber with astonishing speed and precision, his razor-sharp teeth finding their mark and disarming the man in one swift motion. The gun clattered uselessly to the floor. Seizing the moment, Jonathon vaulted over the counter, pinning the robber to the ground until the wail of approaching sirens filled the air. Looking down at the defeated assailant, then back at Cipher, Jonathon couldn't suppress a smirk. "You picked the wrong gas station, buddy," he said, his voice tinged with feral satisfaction. "I used to work at Waffle House, motherfucker." Cipher's tail wagged slightly in approval as the robber could only groan in response. Media attention. The dawn barely broke when the town erupted into a frenzy of excitement. Local news outlets descended upon the story like ravenous birds, each vying for their piece of the sensational narrative. "Mystery dog saves local man from armed robbery," blared the headlines, splashed across screens and papers in bold typeface. In the quiet of his grandmother's inherited house, Jonathon sat in his modest living room. The absence of his children, staying with their mother, left a palpable void. Flickering television images painted his face in an ever-changing tableau of light and shadow. Beside him lounged Cipher, his savior from the previous night's chaos, who was now too heroic to be left scrounging for scraps. "Looks like you're a bona fide celebrity," Jonathon mused, his hand reaching Cipher's ears. "What do you say we make this partnership official?" Cipher's wagging tail spoke volumes. In that moment, Jonathon's decision to adopt the dog crystallized. An impulsive choice, perhaps, but one that felt predestined. Yet their newfound fame cast a long shadow. Malevolent figures observed their story in distant, darker corners with twisted interest. The collaborators. Take notice. In a dimly lit room, a group of men huddled around a bank of computer screens, their faces illuminated by the flickering glow of a looping news clip featuring Cipher's heroic deed. "That's the dog," one man stated, his voice as cold as his eyes. The elder of the group, his authority palpable, issued a command. "We need that dog, and this time, no loose ends." The others nodded, recalling their recent raid on the rural home of the dog's previous owner, a former Navy SEAL. In the ensuing chaos, the animal had vanished into the night. Driven by instinct, Cipher had traveled nearly 60 miles north before fate guided him to Jonathon's gas station. Fingers flew across keyboards as the men mined data on their new obstacle. A name emerged: Jonathon Nichols. "Gentlemen," the leader instructed, a sinister smile playing on his lips, "acquire the dog and ensure no witnesses remain." His words hung in the air, heavy with the promise of violence. First-ish encounter with danger. The evening settled quietly over Jonathon's house, his daughter's continued absence leaving it feel empty. Cipher sprawled on a nearby rug, eyes half closed but vigilant, as if sensing the fragility of their peace. Jonathon absently flipped through TV channels, the flickering images failing to hold his attention. Suddenly, Cipher tensed, ears erect, a low growl rumbling from his throat. "What is it, boy?" Jonathon asked, leaning forward. Before he could process the situation, a thunderous crash shattered the stillness. Two masked men burst through the window, guns drawn, their intentions clear. Cipher sprang to his feet, positioning himself between Jonathon and the intruders, his snarl fierce and protective. "Nice doggy," one man sneered, aiming at Cipher. "You might want to rethink that," Jonathon retorted coldly, grabbing a scarred baseball bat from behind the couch. Tension filled the room, each second an eternity. Cipher struck first, lunging at the nearest intruder with lethal precision, disarming him in a blur of fury. Seizing the moment, Jonathon swung his bat, connecting with the other man's gun and sending it skittering across the floor. The intruders exchanged terrified glances before scrambling back through the shattered window, retreating into the night. Jonathon's heart raced as he surveyed the damage, relief flooding him as he confirmed Cipher was unharmed. Questions swirled in his mind. Who were these men, and why had they come? "You okay, boy?" he asked, crouching to inspect Cipher. The dog's steady gaze offered reassurance. As the adrenaline faded, Jonathon's hands shook. He realized how close they'd come to disaster, saved only by Cipher's quick action and a stroke of luck. Unease settled over him as he considered the implications. Someone out there wished them harm, but why? With trembling fingers, Jonathon reached for his phone and dialed 911. Police interrogation and aftermath. Sirens wailed, and lights flashed as police descended upon Jonathon's home, transforming the quiet neighborhood into a bustling crime scene. Yellow tape cordoned off the shattered window, a stark reminder of the night's violence. Detective Laura Miller approached Jonathon, her keen eyes surveying the room. "Mr. Nichols, I'm Detective Miller. Can you walk me through what happened here?" Jonathon recounted the events, his words painting a vivid picture of the break-in, standoff, and the intruder's hasty retreat. Cipher sat vigilantly by his side, eyes fixed on Jonathon's face. "Your dog's a hero," Miller observed, her gaze filled with admiration and curiosity. "He may have saved your life tonight." "Yeah, he's something else," Jonathon agreed, instinctively petting Cipher. "Twice in 1 week. You're making a habit of this hero business." Miller chuckled. "He's a keeper, that's for sure." "We hurt them. Do you think they went to the hospital?" Jonathon asked, his tone thoughtful. "We're looking into that," Miller assured him. "Do you think this is related to the attempted robbery at the gas station?" "We're investigating all possibilities," she replied. "I'd recommend getting your dog checked out. Encounters like this can be traumatic, even for animals. Plus, they might have tried to subdue him somehow." "I'll take him to the vet first thing," Jonathon said resolutely. "Good," Miller nodded, concluding her notes. "We'll be in touch. Stay vigilant, Mr. Nichols. Whoever these people are, they're dangerous." As the police departed, Jonathon locked the door with a sense of finality. He looked down at Cipher, who returned his gaze with unwavering loyalty. The vet visit. Dawn had barely broken when Jonathon pulled into the veterinary clinic's parking lot, the previous night's events weighing heavily on his mind. Cipher sat in the passenger seat, his eyes meeting Jonathon's with a look of readiness. "All right, buddy. Let's get you checked out," Jonathon said, his voice a blend of concern and resolve. The receptionist greeted them with a warm but questioning smile. "Rough night?" "You could say that," Jonathon replied, urgently filling out paperwork. In the examination room, a middle-aged man with a calm demeanor, Dr. Simmons, began his thorough checkup. After studying the X-rays, he furrowed his brow. "There's something strange here," he said, breaking the silence. "What is it?" Jonathon asked, his heart racing. "Your dog has 2 microchips," Dr. Simmons replied, pointing to the images. He scanned Cipher with a handheld device, made notes, and typed codes into a laptop. One is standard for identification and medical history. But the other, I've never seen anything like it. It's not just a microchip, it's something different. The scanner sees it, but the information is encrypted, Encrypted? Jonathon raised an eyebrow. Is it dangerous? The chip itself, almost certainly not, Dr. Simmons admitted. But I have a friend, a retired military officer, who worked with specialized canine units. He might be able to help explain what this is. What about the regular chip? Jonathon asked. It says his name is MWD 869, owned by Michael Thompson of Smithsville, Tennessee. The vet called the provided number, but it was out of service. Jonathon looked at Cipher, who seemed to sense the seriousness of the situation. All right, let's get to the bottom of this. Can I have the address in Smithville? As they left the clinic, Jonathon couldn't shake the feeling they were stepping into uncharted territory, but they would face it together. On the drive home, Jonathon's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Simmons. My military friend is interested in Cipher's case. Can you meet tomorrow? Jonathon felt a mix of relief and apprehension. A lead at last. But what would it reveal? Investigation begins. The creaking door revealed an office steeped in military history. Medals, faded photographs, and tactical maps adorned the walls, each silently narrating tales of valor and sacrifice. The air hung heavy with the scent of old leather and gun oil, tinged with the aroma of secrets. Captain Harris, a grizzled veteran, sat behind a cluttered desk. His sharp eyes locked onto Jonathon as he entered. So, you're the guy with the wonder dog, Harris said, his gravelly voice resonating with years of command. And you're the guy who might know why my dog has a James Bond microchip, Jonathon quipped, masking the seriousness of the situation with wry humor. Harris chuckled dryly, gesturing to his computer screen. Jonathon watched as Harris began decrypting the data from Cipher's mysterious second microchip. The tension was palpable, each second stretching endlessly. Cipher lay quietly at Jonathon's feet, sensing the moment's importance. Finally, Harris looked up, his eyes grave. This chip has military-grade encryption. It's not just for identification. There's data here, but it's beyond this system's capabilities to decrypt. Like top-secret spy stuff? Jonathon whispered. Harris nodded. Your dog isn't just a pet, Jonathon. He's a living, breathing, safe deposit box, and whatever he's carrying, someone wants to keep it secret. Jonathon's eyes shifted to Cipher, who returned his gaze with an almost human-like understanding. Looks like we're in the middle of something much bigger than a small-town robbery, said Jonathon. Indeed, Harris agreed, and we should find out what that is before whoever's after this information finds us. Jonathon handed over the slip with Michael Thompson's information. Captain Harris typed the name into a search engine, revealing a shocking headline. Retired Navy veteran found murdered in Smithfield home. Smithfield, Tennessee, June 11, 2024. In a shocking and tragic incident, a recently retired Navy veteran was found murdered in his home late last night. Authorities have identified the victim as Michael Thompson, a local resident. The Smithfield Police Department responded to a call around 11:30 p.m., discovering the body of the 45-year-old veteran in his residence on Oakwood Drive. Details surrounding the murder are still emerging, and the police have not yet released information on any suspects or possible motives. This is a heartbreaking loss for our community and for his family. We are doing everything possible to find those responsible, said Police Chief Samuel Brooks. Thompson, who had served with distinction for over 2 decades, had moved to Smithfield to enjoy a quieter life after his retirement from the Navy. Friends and neighbors described him as a respected and beloved figure, often seen volunteering at local events and mentoring young people in the neighborhood. This is a tragic reminder of the dangers that can be faced by even those who have served our country so valiantly," said Mayor Lisa Matthews. "Our thoughts and prayers are with his family during this difficult time." The investigation is ongoing, and police have urged anyone with information to come forward. A memorial service is being planned with details to be announced soon. "Murdered? What the fuck?" Jonathon exclaimed. "You need to take this information to the police," Captain Harris urged. "I'll also make some calls. I have to be at work in 30 minutes. I'll head to the police station when I get off." "Are you sure going to work is a good idea?" "I have bills to pay," Jonathon replied, the weight of his ordinary responsibilities clashing with the extraordinary situation unfolding around him. Second encounter: the stakeout. As Jonathon pulled into the familiar gas station lot, tension crackled in the air. Cipher, ever vigilant, sat beside him, keen eyes scanning their surroundings. The atmosphere thrummed with anticipation, an electric current of unspoken peril. As Jonathon parked, a glint of metal caught his eye across the street, a nondescript car with tinted windows concealing its occupants. A chill ran down his spine. "Looks like we've got company," he muttered to Cipher, whose ears perked up at the foreboding in his voice. When Jonathon's foot touched the asphalt, the car across the street roared to life. Its headlights flared, and the vehicle lunged forward, its engine growling like a predator closing in. Cipher's response was immediate, a bark that was both warning and battle cry, defiance embodied in sound. Acting instinctually, Jonathon leaped back into his car, gripping the wheel like a lifeline. Cipher vaulted into the passenger seat, body coiled and ready, eyes locked on the approaching threat. What ensued was a high-speed chase that seemed to defy physics and fear alike. Tires screeched in protest, leaving ephemeral marks on the road. Engines roared, each rev a testament to the adrenaline flooding their veins. Jonathon's eyes were steely orbs of focus as he executed a series of daring maneuvers, sharp turns, sudden brakes, and audacious swerves that would impress even a Hollywood stunt driver. The pursuing car was relentless but not infallible. It struggled to match Jonathon's calculated recklessness and intimate knowledge of local streets. Finally, after an eternity of chaos, Jonathon saw his chance. A quick veer into a narrow alley and the tailing car sped past, its occupants cursing in frustration. Pulling to a stop, Jonathon exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. His eyes met Cipher's. Words were unnecessary. They had survived, this time. The police connection. A new ally. Jonathon sat across from Detective Laura Miller, her meticulously organized desk between them. The atmosphere was tense, charged with unspoken concerns and looming threats. "What can you tell me about this vehicle?" Miller inquired, pen poised over her notepad. Jonathon provided what scant details he could recall from the frantic chase. "This is the third time in a week that I've been attacked. If it wasn't for Cipher—" Miller glanced at the dog, then back at Jonathon. "You've had quite the eventful week. Most people get a dog for companionship, not a personal security detail." Jonathon chuckled, though his eyes betrayed his concern. "Life's been anything but quiet since Cipher came around. And it's not just me I'm worried about. I have 2 young daughters. Thankfully, they weren't home that night. But what about next time?" Miller's gaze met Jonathon's with newfound gravity. "Given the circumstances, I'd recommend enhancing your home security, and maybe even considering temporary relocation for your daughters." "Already in the works," Jonathon said. They'll stay with their mother for now. Good, Miller nodded. And Cipher? Any more surprises? Jonathon hesitated, deciding to withhold the information about the encrypted microchip. Instead, he said, I also learned that his previous owner was murdered. Miller's eyes widened. Excuse me, you probably should have led with that. Jonathon explained about Michael Thompson and the tragic discovery. I planned on coming in after my shift to tell you all this. Miller closed her notepad, her demeanor shifting. All right, this is beyond petty crime. I'm escalating this to federal authorities, but consider me an ally. We need to get to the bottom of this. I recommend you find somewhere to lay low where people won't think to look for you. Jonathon stood, Cipher rising with him. Thank you, Detective. As they left the police station, Jonathon felt a complex mix of relief and trepidation. They had allies now, but the stakes had escalated, reaching the core of his family's safety. Let's go find ourselves a hideout, buddy, he said to Cipher as they stepped into the daylight, the impact of their new reality settling upon them. The Gathering Storm, Unveiling the Conspiracy. Over the next few days, Jonathon immersed himself in research, attempting to unravel the mystery surrounding Cipher. Captain Harris provided valuable leads, directing him toward classified military projects involving canine units. Meanwhile, Detective Miller kept him apprised of the police investigation, which had now captured federal attention. In a secure video conference with Detective Miller, Jonathon and Captain Harris shared their findings. We've uncovered references to a project codenamed Guardian, involving specially trained dogs in covert operations. Cipher might be part of this, Jonathon explained. Harris leaned forward, his expression grave. Project Guardian was highly classified. If Cipher's involved, we're dealing with national security implications. Miller added, the FBI is extremely interested in Cipher and his connection to his owner's murder. They've offered protection for you and your daughters. The NCIS should be contacted as well, Harris suggested. The FBI will handle that, Miller assured. My primary concern is Jonathon's safety. Jonathon paused, weighing the situation. Harris nodded. Agreed. Decrypting Cipher's microchip data is our first step. I have contacts who can do this, but it'll take time. Microchip? Miller inquired, surprised. Jonathon shifted uncomfortably at the revelation of this secret. Yes, Cipher has 2 microchips. One standard, one containing encrypted data, Harris explained. This keeps getting more complex, Miller sighed. Time may not be on our side, Jonathon said, glancing at Cipher. We've already faced 2 encounters. 3 if you count the robbery. It's only a matter of time before they try again. Miller's expression turned serious. Slow down, gentlemen. That's why I involved the FBI. As the conference concluded, Jonathon felt a mix of dread settle over him. Cipher, sensing his mood, nuzzled his hand in silent support. We're in the eye of the storm now, Jonathon thought. The Federal Connection, a web of intrigue. The buzzing of his phone shattered the early morning silence of Jonathon's temporary safe house. The screen displayed unknown caller. Jonathon speaking, he answered cautiously. Mr. Nichols, this is Special Agent Helen Mitchell from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'd like to discuss your recent experiences and, of course, your dog Cipher. A knot tightened in Jonathon's stomach. All right, go on. We've been briefed by Detective Miller, and we're taking over the investigation. Jonathon glanced at Cipher, lounging on his makeshift bed of towels, blissfully unaware of the conversation's significance. So what does this mean for us? We'd like to bring you and Cipher in for a debriefing, We need to extract the data from his chip and determine why you're being targeted." "And my daughters?" Jonathon interjected, his voice laced with concern. "We're arranging for their protection as well. This has become a matter of national security, and we're taking every precaution." Jonathon hesitated, his mind racing. "How do I know I can trust you? This all seems too convenient." Agent Mitchell's voice remained steady. "I understand your concerns. We can arrange for Detective Miller to accompany you, if that would make you more comfortable." Jonathon sighed, a mixture of relief and apprehension washing over him. "When do we do this?" "As soon as possible. We'll send a secure transport for you and Cipher. What's the address?" "All right," Jonathon agreed, sharing his location before ending the call. The twist: a narrow escape. After hanging up with Agent Mitchell, a gnawing unease settled in Jonathon's stomach. Something felt off. He dialed Captain Harris. "Jonathon, what's going on?" Harris answered, concern evident in his voice. "I just got a call from the FBI. They want Cipher and me to come in for a debriefing. I gave them my address, and they're sending a car." A pause on the other end spiked Jonathon's heart rate. "Listen carefully," Harris finally said, his voice low and urgent. "You need to get out of there. Now." "What? Why? This seems like a setup. Why didn't Miller just come for you? Why did they need to ask your location? You and Cipher are in danger." "But they said they're sending a secure transport." "That's exactly what they'd say if they were setting you up. Do you trust me?" Jonathon didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Then go, take Cipher and disappear. I'll work on my end to figure out what's happening." Jonathon ended the call, mind racing. He grabbed a duffel bag, throwing in essentials. Cipher tensed, sensing the urgency. As Jonathon zipped up the bag, tires crunched on the gravel outside. Peeking through the curtains, he saw a black SUV pull into the driveway. The men stepping out weren't in any recognizable uniform. They moved with a predatory grace that sent chills down his spine. "Cipher, we have to go," he whispered, grabbing the bag and heading for the back door. As they slipped out, Jonathon took one last look at the safe house, his sanctuary turned trap. Was Miller involved somehow? "So much for her being my ally," he thought. They made their way into the woods behind the house, Cipher leading. Jonathon's phone buzzed. A text from Detective Miller. "Jonathon, I need you to come down to the station." He typed back quickly. "Something's wrong. Had to leave. We'll explain later." As they moved deeper into the woods, Jonathon felt the impact of their narrow escape. They were fugitives now, running from an enemy they didn't fully understand. On the run. Jonathon and Cipher moved cautiously through the woods, the crunch of leaves underfoot breaking the eerie silence. Though no survivalist, Jonathon's childhood adventures had familiarized him with these woods. Still, this was far from childish exploration. His heart pounded, each beat a stark reminder of their precarious situation. Hours seemed to pass before they stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. The musty scent of disuse permeated the air, but it offered a temporary haven. Jonathon set down the duffel bag and filled a bowl with water for Cipher, who lapped it up eagerly. "We're safe for the moment, buddy," Jonathon said, his voice a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. "But we need a plan." His phone buzzed with a message from Captain Harris. "Lay low. I'm working on getting you some help. Don't trust anyone. And take the SIM out of your phone." Jonathon sighed heavily. Trust had become a luxury he could no longer afford. His thoughts drifted to his daughters, their faces filling him with a bittersweet cocktail of love and dread. They were at their mother's house this week, a small mercy in this chaos. But he knew this situation needed resolution before he could dream of seeing them again. He sank into a creaky wooden chair, mind racing. Just days ago, he was a simple assistant manager at a gas station. Now, he was caught in a web of espionage and danger, all because of a dog he'd found by a dumpster. Cipher, seeming to sense his turmoil, nuzzled his hand, offering comfort or perhaps seeking it. As night fell, Jonathon sat in the dimly lit cabin, candlelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. Cipher lay beside him, alert but calm. The sense of their isolation pressed down on them, the removed SIM card a necessary sacrifice for safety. Suddenly, the crunch of gravel under tires shattered the silence. Cipher's ears perked up, a low growl rumbling from his throat. Jonathon grabbed a nearby hatchet, his only defense, and cautiously peered out the window. A car pulled up, its headlights illuminating the cabin's weathered facade. The door opened, and, to Jonathon's shock, Captain Harris stepped out. "Cipher, stay," Jonathon commanded softly, opening the cabin door. "Captain Harris, what are you doing here? How did you find me?" "I tracked your phone," Harris replied calmly. "Why do you think I told you to remove the SIM card?" Incredulity and suspicion warred within Jonathon. "How do I know I can trust you?" he demanded, hatchet still firmly in his grip. "Who was that at the safe house? Were they legit? How do you have the ability to track my phone?" Okay. One question at a time," Harris said, eyeing the hatchet warily. "But first, could you put that down?" "Answers first, hatchet down after," Jonathon retorted, his voice hard. Harris sighed, resignation clear in his features. "I'm not sure who they were. When I contacted Detective Miller, she said she didn't know either." "Shit! Fuck! Who am I supposed to trust?" Jonathon exploded, the stress of the situation finally breaking through his composure. "I have to ask you to trust me," Harris said softly, "which I'm sure is a tall order right now." "You think?" Jonathon scoffed. But the fight was draining out of him. He quickly assessed his options, realizing the limited choices before him. With a deep breath, he lowered the hatchet, a silent sign of acquiescence and tentative trust. The revelation and the road ahead. Captain Harris cautiously approached his car. "I need to get something for you. It's a bug-out bag," he explained, retrieving the pack and a phone. "You'll find essentials there: food, first aid, cash. The phone is untraceable, but use it only for emergencies." Jonathon nodded, accepting the items. "I appreciate it, but what's the plan? I can't stay here forever." Harris's expression turned grave. "You're right. We need to act fast. I've got someone you should meet. She'll be here any moment." "Another stranger I have to trust?" Jonathon asked, apprehension evident in his voice. "Sometimes trust is a luxury we can't afford," Harris replied, meeting Jonathon's gaze. "But right now, it's a necessity." Jonathon glanced at Cipher, who seemed to nod in approval. The irony of Harris echoing his earlier thoughts about trust wasn't lost on him. "All right, let's meet this person," Jonathon conceded. Minutes later, another car pulled up. As they approached, Jonathon felt the burden of his shattered, quiet life, now replaced by a dangerous reality he struggled to comprehend. A woman stepped out, her eyes lingering on Cipher before addressing Jonathon. "This is Sarah," Harris introduced. "She has information you need to hear." Sarah extended her hand, her grip firm and gaze unyielding. "Pleasure to meet you, Jonathon. I wish it were under better circumstances." "Likewise," Jonathan replied. "So, what's this important information?" Sarah glanced at Harris, who nodded before she continued. "I'm a cybersecurity analyst. I've been tracking the people after your dog. They're using advanced technology to smuggle classified data. Your dog Cipher is part of this intricate web. His prior owner was working with us to expose them, but as you know—" Jonathan looked down at Cipher, sitting attentively as if understanding the importance of the conversation. "So, what's our next move?" Sarah booted up her laptop. "First, we need to decrypt the data in Cipher's microchip. It could give us leads on who's behind this and what they're planning." Harris interjected, "And we need to do it fast. They'll come down hard once they realize we're onto them." For the next several hours, thanks to the small portable generator Captain Harris had brought with him, the cabin transformed into a makeshift operations center. Sarah worked on decryption, Harris made calls on another burner phone, and Cipher watched the unfolding drama intently. Finally, Sarah sighed in relief. "Got it. The chip contains coordinates and a series of codes. It looks like a timetable for a shipment." Harris studied the screen. "This is big. We need to inform the authorities, but which ones?" Jonathan felt conflicting emotions. "And my daughters? I can't involve them in this." Sarah closed her laptop. "We'll arrange for their safety. A trusted colleague will ensure they're taken to a secure location." "It's time to end this, Jonathan. We've got enough to take them down," Harris declared. "And who exactly is this we? FBI? NSA?" Jonathan pressed. "I'm an NCIS cybersecurity contractor," Sarah replied, without elaboration. As they prepared to leave, Sarah turned to Jonathan. "There's something else you should know. Your dog's name isn't Cipher. According to the data, his name is Orion." "Orion?" Jonathan looked at his companion, who perked up at the name. "Why that name? Does it mean something?" Sarah nodded. "Orion is a code name for special operations. It signifies a high-value asset." Jonathan felt astonished and confused. "So, he really is a James Bond dog?" "Something like that," Sarah confirmed. Harris added, "which makes swift action crucial. We're not just dealing with criminals, but people with considerable resources and much to lose." Jonathan looked at Orion, still processing the revelation. "Well, Orion, it looks like you've got a past as complex as this situation." The dog wagged his tail, seeming to acknowledge his newly revealed identity. Harris handed Jonathan the car keys. "Follow us, but keep a safe distance." As they climbed into their vehicles, Jonathan felt a surge of adrenaline. The stakes were high, but for the first time he felt they were taking the fight to the enemy. "Ready, Orion?" he asked, looking at his dog in the rearview mirror. After a pause, he added, "No, I'm still going to call you Cipher." The safe house. In the new safe house, Jonathan paced restlessly, his mind a whirlwind of fragmented thoughts. He felt like a character thrust into the middle of a Brad Thor novel without having read the first half. The past few days' events, Cipher, the robbery, the attack on his house, the car chase, the mysterious people at the first safe house, Sarah and Captain Harris, swirled in his mind, a puzzle with pieces that refused to fit together. Captain Harris, seated at a small table, worked tirelessly on his burner phone, his voice a low murmur of urgency and authority. Suddenly, he caught Jonathan's eye and motioned him over. "Yeah, they're safe. He's right here. I'll put you on speakerphone," Harris said, then mouthed to Jonathan, "It's Detective Miller." Detective Miller's voice crackled through the speaker, tinged with relief. "Thank goodness you're all right. We've been looking all over for you." "I bet you have," Jonathon replied, unable to keep the suspicion from his voice. "Yes, we have," Miller continued, "and so has Special Agent Helen Mitchell. But I should clarify, the person who called you earlier was not her." Jonathon's brow furrowed. "How do you know that?" A new voice, unfamiliar and authoritative, joined the conversation. "Jonathon, this is Special Agent Helen Mitchell. I can assure you it was not me who called you." Jonathon paused, his mind racing. This voice was clearly different from the one he'd heard before. Well, shit, he thought, realizing the depth of the deception he'd narrowly escaped. "Then who was it?" he asked, frustration and curiosity battling in his tone. "We're trying to figure that out," Mitchell replied. "But until we do, we need you and Cipher safe. So, here's what we're going to do." As Agent Mitchell laid out their plans, Jonathon felt a mix of emotions wash over him. Relief at finally connecting with legitimate authorities warred with a lingering sense of paranoia. Sensing Jonathon's unease, Cipher padded over and rested his head on his knee. The simple gesture of loyalty grounded him, reminding him of the unlikely partnership that had thrust him into this situation, and might just see him through it. Captain Harris watched the exchange, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "Jonathon," he said as Mitchell finished speaking, "I know this is a lot to take in, but remember, you're not alone in this. We're here to help, and we will get through this together." Jonathon nodded, absently stroking Cipher's head. "I appreciate that, but I can't help feeling like we're still missing something crucial. Is his chip really so important it is worth killing over?" "In simple terms, yes. Yes, it is," Mitchell's voice came through the speaker, "but that's why we must keep you, your family, and Cipher safe." The showdown. The leader listened excitedly as his new minion cut ties with idiots who failed to get the dog no fewer than 4 times. "We have a fix on his cell phone. He is right here," he said, pointing at the computer screen. "Get your team together. We are getting that dog right now, and I am going with you this time." They drove the 17 miles to the location of the cell phone signal, an old farmhouse. They set up surveillance and waited. Their patience was soon rewarded with the sound of a bark and a visual sighting of the fucking dog going outside to relieve itself. "We have eyes on the Belgian," one spotter reported. Slowly and quickly they began their assault. "Do not shoot the dog. We can't risk damaging the microchip," said the leader, as they moved closer to the farmhouse. As the team moved in, the eerie silence of the night was broken only by the rustle of leaves and the distant sound of the dog's movements. They crept forward, weapons ready, eyes scanning for any movement. The farmhouse loomed ahead, dark and seemingly abandoned, save for the faint glow of a single window. "On my count," whispered the leader, signaling his team to prepare for entry. Suddenly, a sharp, metallic clink echoed from behind them. The leader's eyes widened in realization, but it was too late. The night exploded with the sound of gunfire and shouting as a joint NCIS and FBI tactical team sprang their trap. "Ambush!" screamed one of the assailants, dropping to the ground as bullets whizzed past. Panic set in among the attackers as they tried to find cover. Flashes of muzzle fire lit up the night, and the distinct crack of rifles echoed through the air. "Cover fire!" yelled one of the bad guys, but it was futile. The tactical team moved with precision and deadly efficiency. 2 of the attackers were cut down immediately, their bodies slumping to the ground. Another took a bullet to the shoulder, spinning him around before he fell. "Fall back!" the leader barked, but there was nowhere to retreat. The tactical team had them surrounded. Excited by the chaos, The dog barked furiously from the side of the farmhouse. "NCIS, drop your weapons!" a voice commanded through the chaos. The leader, blood seeping from a gash on his arm where a bullet had grazed him, turned to see agents advancing, rifles aimed and unwavering. He dropped his weapon, a look of defeat washing over his face. "Get down on the ground, now!" an FBI agent ordered, pushing the leader to his knees and swiftly cuffing him. Seeing their leader captured and insurmountable odds, the remaining assailants surrendered, dropping their weapons and raising their hands. The scene was a flurry of activity as the tactical team secured the area, handcuffing the injured and uninjured alike. Medics moved in to tend to the wounded, including the leader, whose injuries, though painful, were not life-threatening. "Clear!" shouted one of the NCIS agents, signaling that the farmhouse and surrounding area were secure. The leader, now in handcuffs and wincing from his wound, was hauled to his feet. He glared at the NCIS and FBI agents, his eyes filled with rage and defeat. "You're finished," one of the agents said coldly. "This is over." The farmhouse, once a silent sentinel in the night, now buzzed with the sound of radios, the murmur of voices, and the soft whine of approaching sirens. Justice had arrived, signaling the capture of the culprits behind the murder of Michael Thompson and the attacks on Jonathon and Cipher. As the tactical team secured the area, the dog, unscathed and wagging its tail, trotted back toward the farmhouse, unaware of its pivotal role in bringing down a dangerous group of criminals. The call. Captain Harris's burner phone buzzed. He answered swiftly. "He's right here. Hold on." Special Agent Mitchell's voice crackled through the speaker. "Jonathon, it's over. We got him." Overwhelmed, Jonathon sat down, wrapping his arms around Cipher. The weight of Mitchell's words hit him hard. "Is the decoy dog okay?" he managed to ask. "Yes, Jonathon, the dog is just fine." "I want to see my kids. We'll take you to them shortly." "You did great, Jonathon." "Thank you," Mitchell said before ending the call. Jonathon sat in silence for a moment, absently stroking Cipher's fur. Captain Harris watched him, giving him space to process. "What happens now?" Jonathon finally asked, looking up at Harris. "Now we get you back to your family," Harris replied. "There will be debriefings later, but let's focus on getting you home for now." Jonathon nodded, standing up. He looked down at Cipher, who wagged his tail. "Ready to go home, boy?" he asked. Cipher barked once in response. As they gathered their few belongings, Jonathon couldn't help but think about the gas station where it all began. He wondered if he'd ever look at it the same way again. "Let's go," Harris said, holding the door open. Epilogue. Weeks later, Jonathon found himself at the gas station, Cipher at his side. After everything they'd been through, the familiar routine of taking out the trash felt oddly comforting. As Jonathon hefted the bags into the dumpster, Cipher sniffed around the area, alert as always. "Just another night at work, huh, buddy?" Jonathon said, patting Cipher's head. The dog looked up at him, tail wagging. They walked back towards the store, the neon lights casting their usual glow on the cracked asphalt. Jonathon paused at the door, his hand on the handle. "You know, I never thought I'd be glad to see this place again," he murmured. Cipher nudged his leg, as if urging him inside. Jonathon chuckled. All right. Let's get back to it." He pushed open the door, the familiar jingle of the bell greeting them. As they stepped inside, Jonathon glanced down at Cipher, who had already settled into his usual spot by the counter. The night stretched ahead, ordinary and uneventful, and for once Jonathon was perfectly content with that. The end. From all of us here at the Elephant Island Chronicles, we hope you have enjoyed this original short story by Geo Marin. Until next time, stay curious.